This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
By popular demand, Place to Be Nation Wrestling returns to the Dirty South for Talk'n WCW, an episodic wrestler showcase designed to educate, evaluate, and entertain, with matches spanning the intimate stage of Techwood Studios to the heights of Space Mountain. Talk'n WCW presents the best, worst, and most surreal offerings from World Championship Wrestling. So cast your gaze to the Turnertron with hosts Jennifer Smith, Tim Capel, and Greg Phillips.
Hi, welcome to Talk'n WCW. My name is Jennifer Smith. I'm here with the mustard gas to my Agent Orange. Tim Capel, how's it going?
Wow. Do we even try to explain that one?
Nope.
I like the mustard.
I was hoping we get a sling blade run in.
It ain't got no mustard gas in it.
Oh, God. Here we are, talking WCW. Hello, Jennifer. And that third voice you hear is Greg Phillips, by way of a little sling blade action. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing quite well, gentlemen and lady. I hope you all are as well as I feel on this fine nondescript night.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty
Putting down
good.
some mustard gas, yeah.
Right. Good on us for getting another episode together pretty quickly, I will have to say.
We did not take our typical 3-month hiatus, so.
Isn't it weird? What's wrong with us?
We're more bi-monthly than quarterly for a change.
I look forward to our next 2 months off from the show.
Yeah, well, I think we've earned it. I mean, you can't expect this kind of output on a regular basis.
Yeah, we're not iron people here. We're not made of iron.
Right, or titanium for that matter.
Yeah, there you go. I was thinking, I was like, what other metals are there? And the only one that came to mind was iron for some reason.
So we're going to talk about my love, Perry Saturn, tonight because I picked him on our last episode. And I think I mentioned when I picked him that I became interested in him in my ECW watching over on the North-South Connection on Extreme Three-Way Dance as a tag team with the Eliminators, with Cronus, and they have been dominant since they showed up in ECW, have had amazing matches and feuds and everything, so I really wanted to see what he could do in WCW, and I personally was not very disappointed, and I went out of my way to watch a variety of his matches, and the obsession remains, and I hope it's the same for you guys, and I'm so freaking stoked to talk about these matches we got.
Yeah, I was super pumped when you picked Saturn. I've been an unapologetic WCW Saturn mark for a long, long time. I mean, I'd say one of the central characters who I thought of as being one of my guys when I got really super into WCW in the late 90s. Because you always gravitate towards just probably a handful of wrestlers who really get you locked into the product, and he was just one of them. I always thought he was the coolest, had the best moves. I knew nothing about his background or his ECW run before this. I was all of 15 years old myself. And so to me, it was just like this dude comes in out of nowhere and is just super awesome, doing all these springboard moves and suplexes, and has this really this really cool look, that's very fitting for the time period. And as we're going to see, is actually a very, very well-rounded wrestler, whether you're talking about a guy who can brawl, who has, a great, or at least I'd say a convincing martial arts background. I don't know how legit it is, but he throws some pretty cool strikes.
Mm-hmm.
He can mat wrestle. Again, the aerial stuff is there. Again, the awesome suplexes, he could pretty much do it all. Jack of all trades. And that's who I think of when I really think of what I love about WCW, Perry Saturn. And of course, going back and looking at some of his work in ECW, I mean, the Eliminators were an awesome tag team, and we're going to see that he is a big component of the revitalized tag scene in WCW as well. He's a great singles guy and a great tag team wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
So, Darlene, I mean, somebody who's super well-rounded, could pretty much do it all, and got me back into. It's just not the guy who got me back into wrestling, but is one of those instrumental pieces in putting my fandom back together, I would say.
A little bit ahead of his time, I think. Talking to that versatility, he really feels like the prototype for the modern pro wrestler, the guy that can kind of do a little bit of everything. He can brawl. He can, as you mentioned, he can fly. He can throw incredible suplexes. He's built like a tank. He could do things a guy his size shouldn't be able to do, like springboard moonsaults and things of that nature. I thought my big takeaway from Saturn when I was younger, when I was, I guess 13, I didn't get ECW television where I was living. If you weren't in New York or Florida, you were kind of screwed on getting ECW television in those days. So I didn't get to see ECW except in wrestling magazines. And I'd always read about the Eliminators and like the after mags and stuff. And they sounded awesome. And I remember when ECW did their invasion of Raw in like 97, and I saw the total elimination move, and I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But I didn't think anything of it. And so when Saturn popped up in WCW, I was like, oh, this is the guy I've read about in the magazines with the Eliminators. I wanted the other Eliminators coming in. And then before too long, I forgot that John Cronus was even a thing. So, because Saturn was just so, and it's so interesting. Maybe you guys will agree with me on this. It feels like in WCW, Saturn, because he wasn't in a company with these guys, he kind of took the best elements of Taz and Sabu's arsenals and combined them into his own. And kind of, he would do the cool suplexes that Taz did, but he would do the crazy, we'll see a match today where he did the Sabu double jump moonsault. And it felt like all these cool, crazy things I had seen Sabu and Taz do when they appeared briefly on Raw. Here was this guy in WCW doing it in every match pretty much. And a guy that really, I think, you could take 1998, 97 Perry Saturn and pluck him into today's AEW or WWE, and I think he'd be a big star.
I agree with all of that. And it makes complete sense for him to combine those styles, just, given who he wrestles in ECW and who he spends so much time with these guys, Taz and Sabu, all over 1996. So it makes sense to me that he picks up those moves because he could just do them. He just can. He can do anything, and that was one of the things that I picked up on from him in the Eliminators is his adaptability to whoever he's wrestling. And Cronus has the same ability, which is cool. Because I think it's pretty rare, and then both of those guys can do that in that tag team and function like perfectly. It's amazing to watch. I also think that Saturn we don't get to see it really in the matches that we're going to cover tonight, but he also has a lot of that intangible things, like the things that you can't really like teach. He just has it. And even on the mic, like we don't get to hear him that much on the mic here, but he's really good, just shit talking, and, he can talk too, which, is one of those things that is just part of what makes him like completely badass.
Real natural aptitude for sure.
Right.
And, offensively, he is a bit of a chameleon, a bit of a sponge. You talk about how much he worked with Taz and Sabu as opponents as a tag team and just sort of borrowed or stole quite liberally from their moveset, but in ways that worked really well and just complemented his own style. And I think that's one of the things that maybe separates a Saturn from a John Cronus, who I'm not trying to bury or anything, but from what people in the industry will tell you, like Saturn was always really driven to continue improving himself, to always just get better, to become even more of a skilled combatant in as many ways as he possibly could. Even when, a lot of guys will sort of figure out what kind of wrestler they are, and that's just sort of their style, right? And they'll just kind of plateau, but in a way that really, works for them and that the audience becomes accustomed to. And Saturn just never really settled on being any one kind of wrestler. He was just always driven to continue evolving, I think. And, I've just always admired that, about him. And I wish that he had, had more of a career, really. Like, we don't, see, like, he doesn't have the greatest run in WWF/E for various reasons, but,
he did
he's
fall in
another
love
one.
with the mop, though, and I did appreciate
He did
that.
fall in love with a mop.
I'm sorry, what?
Interesting character choice.
We'll tell you about Moppy after the show.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Fill me in. Smart me up on that. Because I was just going to say before you mentioned the mop that that he has this, I don't know, he has this like really like, it's like a mixture of like intelligence and like feralness, like just his eyes, like his face, like it just comes across. Like,
would you? I completely agree. He looks like a savage in the ring,
right? But he's so smart. You could see him like finding what he wants to pick up and like finding. I don't know. He just, the awareness is amazing. Would
you agree, Tim, that maybe what I think probably substance issues were probably what ultimately doomed his career. But I think one of the things, I don't think it did him any favors coming in with the Radicals, only because it automatically set it up as a competition between them. And that was one that he and Malenko were not going to win, And I think it kind of hurt both of them because Eddie was such a charisma machine and Benoit was at that time probably the best wrestler in the world in terms of his technique and stuff like that. So it kind of left Saturn feeling like the third wheel in the group, as opposed to in WCW where he was really his own. I know they put them in a group near the end of his WCW run, but during the bulk of his run, he was really his own man and he was his own individual shining star.
Well, it just tells you something about the talent pool that they had at that time in early 2000, that someone as gifted as a Perry Saturn on your roster is going to, from the day he arrives, just get outshined already. Because that's just how deep their talent pool was. Had the timing been a little bit different, I think he could have had a different career there.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, you take him and you pluck him into today's roster on either of the major national promotions, he'd be a star because he wrestles a style that is you see a lot, but he does it better than most guys that do it now. So
he does the types of things. He was doing the types of things that today are expected of a main event wrestler, but were unheard of in like, especially not talk about the main event, a mid-card wrestler in 1998. I mean,
absolutely,
he just effortlessly, the way that he, just goes out there and it's not just, and it's not just like, the indie-rific kind of move stuff. Like there is a psychology to it.
Yes.
Now you can argue, depending on his opponent, it can get a little indulgent, as perhaps we will see. There's a method to our madness sometimes on this show, but I mean, he's not just like a spot fest guy. He's that sort of. I think you made the comparison to like a Seth Rollins. He is what is expected of a main event wrestler today. I mean, that probably not too far off from like an Adam Cole either, with with that type of
and
style.
Saturn would, with his physique too. I mean, he was built. He looked normal in those days, but today he would look like a monster.
An absolute monster.
Yeah.
I mean, you see how Billy Gunn looks on the AEW roster, and it's like, and he was not a huge guy in the Attitude Era, so
not considered a huge guy. Yeah.
So Saturn would have been an enormous star, and actually I think I was a little mistaken when I chose my match, because I think my match would chronologically be the first of our three tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the first time I remember seeing Perry Saturn, but I was reminded through commentary, which I subsequently did a little research on, that Saturn had actually wrestled a few times before this event. He'd even won the television title briefly, which I didn't remember at all. And, but nonetheless, in my memory banks, I'm sure I would have seen it because I watched every week at that time. But the first time I remember seeing Perry Saturn was at Starrcade 97. None other than the biggest show on paper in WCW history, the most anticipated pay-per-view event of all time. I ordered it, watched it with my family, and I was really excited. One of the matches on the card was going to be Chris Benoit versus Raven. They had been feuding for several months, and I was excited to finally see them lock it up. But as we'll discuss in this opening contest, things did not go the way that young Greg expected as Raven. This match does come to you, by the way, from Starrcade 97 in, I want to say, Baltimore, Maryland. Is that correct? Or
Washington, D.C.
Close enough. Close enough. Hop, skip, and a jump away. Our nation's capital, here to see a monumental show it turned out to be. And so Raven opens us up with no music. This is before they had done the Even Flow, or I'm sorry, the whatever song, Come As You Are. So he gets no music here, and he comes out and he does this is really at the very beginning of Raven getting really hot, and he gets in the ring and he says that when he signed with WCW, he agreed to only wrestle when he wants, how he wants, and against who he wants. And tonight he's decided he's not going to wrestle, and instead Saturn is going to finish the job for him of ending the career of one Chris Benoit. And so here comes the sirens play, and out comes Saturn, which, by the way, isn't it interesting that Saturn was doing the sirens before Scott Steiner, who arguably made it very, famous. But Saturn had the siren gimmick before Scott. So out comes Saturn, and at this point, Saturn looks a little bit different than kind of, I think, what most people remember of him from WCW. He's got the kind of brown cargo pants and military boots, and he's got a hoodie pulled over his head. And when he removes the hoodie, he has a most unusual hairstyle. Would you not agree?
Probably the most hair I've ever seen him have.
For sure.
Yeah, he has some odd hair periods in WCW. This is kind of it's like shaved on the sides, but he has like a flat top sort of thing going on. A
landing strip, if you will.
A landing strip, yeah, that's probably a good way to put it.
It's very bushy, though.
But he doesn't style it in any particular way. It's not like a mohawk or anything.
Oh, it's like a circle of hair, like on his head, just like pointing.
Yeah, just chilling there.
You know what? He's badass. He owns it. He can do it. He can have whatever hairstyle he wants.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't call him out on it.
Fuck no.
But yeah, he's got sort of that grunge look, but also there's like a militaristic theme, which I mean, I guess kind of complements his background, as they always talk about how he was like an Army Ranger. He jumped out of a plane however many hundreds of times, and all this stuff just to make him, which I'm not saying isn't true, but I mean, obviously contributes to him sounding and looking like such a badass.
Oh, absolutely. And he was perfect for the Flock, because the Flock was the outcasts of society, right? So they were, I mean, as we'll see during this match, we'll discuss them a little bit, but you had the likes of Hammer, or as they were calling him at that point, not Van Hammer, I believe, just Hammer. Right. You had a Sick Boy and Kidman, who was doing a heroin addict
Billy
gimmick.
Kidman.
Nope,
Yeah,
just
heroin
kidnapped.
addict gimmick.
And
Yeah.
he scratched constantly, 7-year itch and all that. And then the eventually you would get Scotty Riggs, or just Riggs, I guess. Murtaugh never joined, unfortunately. But nonetheless, you would have all of these individuals there. And Saturn was like the badass of the group. Like, you look at all of them, and you're like, look at these dregs of society. They're no threat to me. But then there's Saturn, who could beat somebody's ass and do it all at Raven's behest.
He was their Art Anderson. Yeah.
Exactly. And in this case, he is indeed wrestling the aforementioned Canadian crippler, Chris Benoit, who comes out to a rousing ovation from the crowd. Benoit is very over at this point in his WCW tenure. The fans have taken to him, and they're quite happy with the brand of violence that he unleashes in the ring. And he gets there, and they get underway, and they get right after it. Benoit tries to go after Raven. Saturn jumps him from behind, or attempts to. Benoit takes over and just unloads on him with chops. This is, of course, your babyface shine portion of the match, and Benoit just lays into Saturn with chops and great looking kicks and punches and clotheslines, and he's Saturn's bumping and feeding for him, and Benoit, as we know, Benoit is one of the great choppers in wrestling history, and certainly he lays that into Saturn here. But not that Saturn is a pushover for Benoit. He gets his advantage too, and I think his first move that he takes over with is this awesome head and arm trap suplex, overhead suplex, which is or as ECW would call it, a Tazplex.
Or a gargoyle suplex, as the video games would call it.
Yes, the gargoyle suplex. I love that.
Oh my lord,
loved
really?
it. Absolutely. One of Chris Jericho's 1,000 holds, no doubt. But yes. So he does this beautiful overhead suplex, and to take over, does a springboard leg drop at one point, jumps up to the middle rope, springs back, drops a leg. It's incredible to watch for a guy his size. This is the reason, by the way, that I chose this match. It was the first time I remember seeing Saturn, or at least that it stuck with me apparently, and I was blown away seeing a guy his size do the things he was doing, because I had seen Sabu when he was in WCW, so I knew like kind of what his deal was, but Sabu wasn't close to as jacked as Saturn was, and Saturn's up here hitting these things even cleaner than he did, and at times, and I was like, wow, this is nuts.
I was gonna say you're probably also used to seeing Sabu botch it 50% of the time.
How dare you?
He didn't botch it bad in WCW, but
God bless him. But I'm just saying.
Yes, no, you're right. There's not
Saturn kind of out Sabu'd Sabu.
I would kind of agree with that.
So they end up outside the ring. Benoit gets the advantage again. They throw Saturn out, and they go out there, and again he's trying to get after Raven, but Saturn gets the advantage. And then here comes the flock, and they, of course, this is Raven's rules. Anything goes. And so the flock jumps on Benoit and starts beating the hell out of him. You get, Hammer lays into, I think it's Hammer, I can't remember who else. Sick Boy for sure does the clothesline off the guardrail on him, which was real. If you've ever watched a Sick Boy appearance, pretty much he had one move, which was the springboard clothesline. So that's what he does here to great effect. And then Kidman threatens to steal the match with the dang shooting star press off the apron.
Casually does a shooting star press off the apron,
which was insane for 19. If you're like, big deal, it's 1997, people, come on, people weren't doing this shit anyway. Unfortunately, here's where my brain was having a hard time with this match when I watched it today. Is like my 13-year-old self, I was flipping out watching this match, because my favorite wrestler in WCW at the time was Chris Benoit, and Saturn was this awesome performer in this match, and I'm sitting here like, this is amazing. And it dawned on me watching today that the fans weren't really reacting to this match after the opening minutes. Like they're kind of dead, and that's partially because Saturn wasn't really over yet. He was known just as a lackey pretty much. But I was thinking to myself, it almost dawned on me that I watched wrestling much differently when I was younger. When I was younger, I didn't care if the crowd reacted to anything. Like the the Chris Benoit Dean Malenko match at Hog Wild 96, which famously has one of the deadest crowd reactions of all time. It was one of my favorite matches when I was a kid. And so here, I remember as a 13-year-old, I was like, I don't care if the crowd reacts to this. These are my guys. They're killing it out there. They're doing shit I'd never seen before. So point being, do better, Washington D.C. crowd. Anyway, Benoit and Saturn.
Look, you know what? I think it's okay to sometimes say that a crowd is wrong. Fuck them.
They are wrong. They were very wrong. And it's hard for me to be too mad at them, be given what they would, be faced with later that night. But nonetheless, they deserve our ire in this situation. Saturn,
I get it sometimes. I get it to some extent. I'll put it that way. But at the same time, why is my enjoyment of this match contingent on what these idiots are thinking? Yeah. Fuck them.
Exactly.
I like to think they're just absorbing what was happening because
they liked Benoit clearly.
Yeah.
I
think they're also, to be fair, again, I'm being very fair. Very fair and balanced here.
Sure.
The match they thought they were getting was Benoit Raven,
right.
which was
false advertising and all that.
A legit hot feud, and they'd already this show is littered with all kinds of issues.
I had forgotten about that actually until I started watching.
I don't even know if they had announced the whole. I feel like they had at least announced that Nash was not going to be showing up because he had a heart attack or whatever.
Wait, what?
It's a whole thing.
He drank too much coffee, whatever.
Coffee, all right.
It didn't work for him, brother.
His trick knee was acting. It was some whatever.
Didn't
so they already knew, all right, there's one which was was Giant Kevin Nash probably this show's maybe co-main event?
I would say so. That was definitely the second most promoted match on the show.
Yeah, they had the Bischoff
and Larry. Yeah,
who cared about that really at the end of the day? But
the Mauler.
Yeah. So this crowd is probably already a little bit down. Like they've got their work cut out for them in the ring to try to get them back. When you lose the crowd before the show has even started, that's a bad sign, and that's maybe what happened here. So already they're like, all right, we're not going to see a big match that we're looking forward to. Now you're telling us the mid card isn't even going to deliver, and that's what WCW is kind of known for in '97 is if the main event's going to let us down, at least we can find our joy in the mid card. And it's like, we're not even going to see this fucking Benoit, Raven match. Like, what is this? So, yeah, I guess I'll be a little bit forgiving because, I have to say, as trade-offs go, Benoit Saturn, I can work with that in lieu of a Benoit Raven match. That's
absolutely
not too terrible looking, and see what they can do.
And at one point in the match, Saturn does a beautiful, it's actually a pretty clever way to get Benoit back on offense. It looks like the flock is just, Benoit's got him in the crossface at ringside. I think he's got Kidman in the crossface at ringside. And then all of the flock members descend upon him and they're all beating him up just like they were earlier. Saturn goes to do an acai moonsault, beautiful acai moonsault. Benoit moves out of the way. Saturn wipes out the entire flock. It works perfectly. It didn't nobody looked stupid in it, in the process of it. Then Benoit gets him in the ring and starts tearing him up with the snap suplex, the various chops again, that snap suplex to set up, of course, the diving headbutt, which gets a huge pop. Now the crowd's back into it. The diving headbutt, Benoit nails it. He's about to most likely win this match. In come the flock again. Benoit's tearing him off, throwing him in various directions. And then here comes Raven, and Raven sticks him with the even flow DDT. Benoit takes a beautiful bump off of it. Saturn grabs Benoit, locks him into one of the coolest WCW submissions. It's kind of lost to time. The Rings of Saturn. One of my favorite moves to do on the old video games, Tim. The N64 video games, the Rings of Saturn. And Benoit is unconscious, of course. Referee rings the bell, and Raven has humiliated Chris Benoit once again. Beautiful stuff. I like the match. It's not the classic that I had it built up in my mind, but as a showcase for Perry Saturn, this match ruled.
Fuck yeah. He gets most of the offense in the match, which I was not expecting for whatever reason. I thought
Benoit was a big star.
I thought Benoit was going to take it a lot of times, but Benoit also had a ECW run, so he's seen Benoit wrestle before, and he already knows his style. You can see when he locks in and when he adapts to that Benoit style and just matches and move. Benoit can't do anything. Like, he just cuts him off everything he tries to do until the end. And, of course, the flock always helps. I was kind of worried when we were doing these matches because I was afraid that the flock would interfere in everything and that it would take away from what Saturn was doing. And in this match, I don't feel like it did. Like, it was all additive to what he's already done. Like, they don't take away, I don't think. I mean, Kidman almost stole the show, but definitely and I was kind of afraid it would be a Benoit match, but it is for sure a Saturn match.
Did you catch Dusty saying, I was about to say, what the flock's going on out here?
That bump off the apron and that's another thing, like, even when he's taking the offense, it looks just as good as when he's giving it. You know, he can take it and give to his partner as much as he adapts to them. The other point I had, the way that he pulls Benoit up by his hair at one point during the match, it's sort of like a little thing, but it's that sort of attention to detail that I really love in a Saturn match.
Yeah, I have to say I love that attention to detail as well, and I had sort of the opposite reaction as you, Greg, to rewatching this one because very similar because I mean we're around the same age. The first time I saw it was like, oh, this is a real blowaway match, and then it was only a few years ago that I rewatched this. I think in the course of just rewatching the entire show, and I thought, oh, this match really isn't as good as I remembered it. It's just kind of there. And, so, spoiler, I was a little bit, disappointed when you picked this one, but then when I rewatched it just yesterday, I was like, oh shit, maybe I sold this one a little bit short. This is like actually, so I'm kind of all over the place with this match.
Depends on your mood when you're watching it.
It
seems to really depend on my mood, which a lot of wrestling is like that. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But I, to your point, Jenny, about how the flock are really additive here, I think is great because what they do is they don't take away from the match at all. They get involved to give you these great heat segments, and to serve as really cannon fodder for Chris Benoit, because you figured, you know, he's this very intense, much bigger star than Saturn or Raven at this point. So if you need him to really get his heat back and take somebody out, that's what the flock are for. And he really just wrecks shop on all of them, but without really sacrificing Perry Saturn to the wolves. So everybody kind of gets their shine except for the flock, but that's what they're there for, to basically eat shit. Exactly. And they do it so very well. This is a real hard-hitting match, I thought. Again, probably speaks to that ECW background.
Yes.
But also a really solid showcase for a Perry Saturn who has not been with the promotion for that long.
Right.
I think we forget that, you know, Raven came in like that summer and sort of bummed around, didn't really do anything for a while. The flock had just kind of gotten started with, I mean, they even had Stevie Richards in there for a cup of coffee. But Saturn doesn't come in until like early, I want to say late October, early November. And he's immediately thrown into that TV title scene. Like you said, Greg, and wins it very early in like just one of his first matches. Granted, it was against Disco Inferno, but does get a championship reign that early in his run, and is part of that TV title scene. Takes a break from it here to have this match with Benoit as Raven's lieutenant, but I just thought from the bat they seem to be serious about pushing Saturn. Gets this pretty prominent role on pay-per-view, and that's going to continue into '98. It's maybe why I responded so strongly to him as a character. I've always sort of been interested in, here's not only the badass villain who's really cool, right? And that's sort of what Raven is. I love to hate Raven, right? He was my first sort of favorite heel, if there is such a thing. But Saturn was his lieutenant, and you've always got to have a cool lieutenant to complement your villain. And they were, again, very serious about Saturn being his own man, but still allied with Raven. And eventually, that has to come to a head. There's going to be some friction there, and there's going to be a break. And I think that's what I was gearing up for, and that's what's going to lead us into the match that I ultimately chose, which is a little bit later into 1998. So a few months after this, a good 6 months later, we're going to be at the Great American Bash. And this time, Greg, we are in Baltimore, right?
Thankfully. So, I knew I'd land on it eventually.
I feel like
get there
one of us always picks a Baltimore show.
Yeah, you can't do a WCW show without eventually landing on Baltimore.
Well, I mean, and I think that's because Great American Bash is such a fixture, such a marquee event. We're always gonna pick some match from a Great American Bash, and so many of them were in Baltimore that this is what we end up with, and it's kind of a similar setup, which I had forgotten about, Greg, where it's supposed to be Raven facing somebody, and he says, "Nope, Saturn, go out there, do my light work."
Yeah.
and
by this point, Saturn's getting tired of it.
He's getting tired of it. Yeah, he's a little bit over it now. And the match was supposed to be Raven versus Mortis. So Mortis of the great Mortal Kombat invasion of 1997.
Absolutely. James Vandenberg's collection of human oddities.
Exactly. Yep. So he tried to have a go. Boy, this is how far down a person has to sink before they're like auditioning for the flock, right? You're trying to join the flock and they won't even take you. So that went very badly for Mortis earlier in the year, and he got turfed. He's been out since, I don't know, probably early January. And now he's returned. He's shed his identity as that human oddity Mortis. He's now just Canyon, and he wants revenge against Raven. But Raven's not having it. Said, "Saturn, you take care of this guy." Saturn is very quick to remind folks that he is not a member of the flock. He is Raven's friend, not a member of the flock, you see. So Raven is taking exception to that.
What was with the WCW kind of predating modern WWE in some ways, naming convention of 1997-98, where guys would just get their last name? Saturn, Canyon, Goldberg.
Yeah. I'll say they're not as bad as modern WWE.
Oh, no,
in
not
that
at all. No.
They would. It's not like it was forbidden to say their first name.
Right. Tony would often say their first name in commentary. Yeah.
You're not going to get chewed out if you did. But yeah, that is a thing where it's just last name.
To their credit, Canyon and Saturn do sound cooler than Chris Canyon and Perry.
I was going to say, Perry is not a very tough first name.
Perry is not a tough guy name. No.
No, not at all.
Sort of a hot guy name.
And and frankly,
A hot
from all the
middle-aged guy named.
Yeah.
from all the Bret Hart interviews over the years, I think I've determined that Goldberg is a better name than Bill Goldberg.
Bill Goldberg.
so, but yes, I agree with you. Saturn was the way to go.
All right, so we're going to start with some bullshit right away with this. This is a 10 match, by the way.
It is.
Can't mention bullshit without. So some real bullshit starts out here with apparently Mortis making his classic entrance. But this is all a bit of subterfuge, you guys, because this Mortis is an imposter, and Canyon has now actually made his entrance from behind. He is behind Perry Saturn, is going to sneak attack Saturn with of all things, schoolboy roll up. So not exactly the hottest start here, but if it gets the job done, hey, great. But Saturn escapes that, whips Canyon into the ropes. Canyon counters with a deep swinging neck breaker. Always looked really good when he did that move. Mm-hmm. But Saturn is going to wind up on Canyon's shoulders off of a charge into the corner, but then he absolutely eats shit from a front pancake. Another cool looking move. Kind of a reverse electric chair.
Yeah, another Canyon innovation.
Yeah, that's something you really saw back then. I get more of that flock interference here, trying to get involved on Saturn's behalf, but Canyon manages to thwart that and sends Saturn to the outside with a lariat. Saturn comes back with a neck snap from the apron and brings himself back in with a slingshot body press, which looks pretty cool. Saturn now unloading on Canyon in the corner with those signature kicks, martial art kicks. It kind of topping it off with a back leg front kick, as Eric Bischoff would love to call, I'm sure. I don't know what else to call it, right?
Oh man.
Now, another interesting sequence here. We find them battling back into the corner. Canyon is on the top rope, drapes a leg across the back of Saturn's neck, and then just drives him into the mat. It's sort of like a lazy version of a Famouser, I guess. That
rocker dropper, if you will.
Yeah, rocker dropper.
Japanese dropper.
A Japanese leg drop, yeah.
Japanese leg drop.
So anyway, the flock now actually pulls Canyon out of the ring for a bit of a beating. Saturn then takes everyone out with a somersault splash.
Oh, that was
so it does not seem to appreciate the assistance from the flock here. Nick Patrick, your favorite referee, Jimmy, has had enough. And he's decided,
I've had enough of him.
Well, Ravens rules or not, he's going to send the flock to the back now. So Saturn then takes to the middle rope, suplexes Canyon in from the apron. This is sort of Cesaro style. Remember when Cesaro would do this move?
Absolutely. And this was a Chris Canyon invention, this move.
It was, yeah. And it's one of those, it looks so awkward because it's like you're giving up a lot of leverage, so you have to rely on just like brute strength in order to deadlift a guy. I mean, it's impressive.
It's incredibly impressive. And it's the kind of move, like when Cesaro was doing it regularly, it was getting a huge reaction every time. Now, the audiences were different back then in terms of what they would react to, but it's such a cool move, and it's such a clever move, and yet another one that, even though Saturn does it here, to my understanding, Chris Canyon is the one that actually came up with that move, and you know.
I've definitely seen him, and I watched other matches of Canyon sort of in this stretch where he does it all the time. So then, Saturn tries to change tacks here a little bit. Says, all right, we'll try to put him away with a submission. Gets that drop toe hold into an ankle lock. Then he does this sort of bridging half Nelson, which
a little bit like
really cool.
Bryan Danielson's cattle mutilation.
A little bit like a cattle mutilation, yeah. Mm-hmm. I sort of wondered if that's what that was starting as, but anyway. Again, we're just seeing so many influences. How many other wrestlers would I name that do all this shit that they didn't even exist at the time.
Right.
Right.
This is how innovative Saturn is here in 1998. Just going to continue with Saturn crotching Canyon across the top rope and bringing him down with a springboard clothesline.
Jesus.
Looks really awesome. Now we're getting some Sabu action in here with springboard drop kick right in Canyon's face. The springboard drop kick off of a chair, followed by that double jump moonsault. So now we're getting a chair involved. We're out Sabuing Sabu once again.
He does the jump to the one rope, then to the other rope, and then does the moonsault. It's incredible to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Canyon is hanging on throughout all of this. I mean, Saturn is going for pins, going for submissions. Canyon's hanging in there. Finally, he puts a stop to this flurry with a Russian leg sweep. And then we get this cool sequence where Saturn winds up on the outside, on the ring apron, tries to go for another one of those slingshot maneuvers, but Canyon catches him in a Northern Light suplex.
Yes, very cool.
Which I can't imagine what kind of coordination and just flexibility that takes. But in any case, Canyon then misses an elbow, so Saturn takes right back over on offense, hitting a neck breaker. We finally slow this pace down a little bit here with a side headlock on the mat. Canyon is battling back. He manages to escape with a belly-to-back souffle. Then we get some kind of a pinning sequence, reminiscent of some stuff you would see in ECW, like Canyon goes for an inside cradle, Saturn counters into a backslide, then he goes for a kind of a chicken wing variant sort of pin. Again, it looked very awkward, but very Saturn. Canyon then showing off some of his innovative offense, hoisting Saturn up into kind of a fireman's carry position, but spins out into I don't know what to call it, but like a reverse TKO where he takes him down by the legs rather than the head.
And like a flapjack of sorts.
Yeah. And then follows that up with a modified burning hammer, of all things. Here again, 1998. Canyon then signals for the flatliner. We get a bit of confusion on commentary as to what exactly the flatliner is. Which really cracked me up because it's like it's almost like the commentator is having a dorky wrestling fan exchange where, like Mike Tenay says, well, he was gonna set up for the flatliner with that reverse Russian leg sweep, which is the flatliner.
And then Tony's like, yes, that Samoan drop off the top rope that he calls the flatliner.
That's what he calls the flatliner. He precedes it with that forward reverse Russian leg sweep, and it's like, all right, he's not doing that move anymore. Just
somehow they having a dorky wrestling moment.
Somehow they did not get the memo that. But that, I mean, I guess that was the original version of the flatliner. This goofy Samoan drop off the top rope that Mortis did a few times, but whatever. So anyway, they never quite settled this one. In any case, Saturn is able to counter the move and picks Canyon up for a Death Valley driver. At least that's what he looks like he's going for. Canyon grabs the ropes this time. Saturn then settles on a standing side kick. Both guys then battle to the top rope and just take a nasty tumble, both hitting the floor. It's pretty sick, those bumps that they take. More bullshit here where the twin Mortises begin brawling at ringside and in the ring. I don't know what to call them. And amidst all this chaos, Saturn comes off the top rope for a something that gets caught by Canyon, and here he does hit the flatliner for the win. The Mortai continue to fight. One of the Mortai congratulates Canyon, but then just as quickly drops him with a DDT. He unmasks himself to reveal this is obviously Raven. Raven, still mostly in the Mortis garb, is berating Saturn for losing back in the ring. He backs off when Saturn starts to take exception to that, gives it back to him a little bit. But then as he notices the flock closing in on the ring, he goads Saturn into attacking him, does Raven. So the flock gets in there. They try to mob Saturn, and they all get their shit pushed.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that was
out
great.
of everybody.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
Because
Yeah.
I just expect like the typical like kick, punch, and fade to black. Like, no, he was not having that. He comes all the
right
way
back
and says, "Fuck all of you." I was marking the fuck out at the end of this match.
I wanted it to go on longer. I wanted him to start DVDing guys.
Yes.
Yeah, do that thing where he gets one of them in the rings of Saturn, and they have to send all the WCW officials out to pry him off.
Oh my God, that would have been so awesome.
Mickey J and all those guys.
Mm-hmm. Some loser like Lodi.
yeah, that whole sequence was phenomenal.
So, wow. And then I think in what has to be the call of the night, Bobby Heenan, who's been largely silent throughout this entire match.
I know exactly what you're about to say. And I laughed so freaking hard.
They always have Heenan do the wrap up, the instant replay, the finish. Mm-hmm. I don't think he said a word throughout the entire match until he gets to his, designated portion that he has to call here, and he goes, "Well, it took Canyon 937 moves, but he got it done in the end."
Yeah. It's like, there you see, he hits that reverse Russian leg. It only took him 937 moves to do it, but he got the win.
Which is just you could tell he just fucking hates matches like this. You can tell he's like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is not. It's a Tim match, but it sure as shit is not a Bobby Heenan match. I'll tell you that much.
But like, why though? Because I had this note too about Bobby. Like, he either sounds drunk, which he probably was, disinterested or whatever. I don't know, but why?
Yeah. Well, I think Bobby's probably an old school guy that doesn't like the what we call move matches, where it's just everybody hitting everybody with everything and kicking out of it. Sort of like the modern style of wrestling.
But, I mean, I guess it might look like that. I don't know.
I think he's just more. Yeah, it is that old school thing where he's probably just more appreciative of the art of professional wrestling, and by that I mean the smoke and mirrors, which is a very minimalist style where you're taking as few chances, as few risks as possible. You're taking as few bumps as possible, but at the same time, creating the illusion that you're really, having this super heavyweight showdown kind of thing.
Right. It's very interesting.
He's a much more WWF main event style of wrestling guy.
It's interesting. It does feel like he kind of holds Saturn and Canyon to a little bit of a different standard. Because I always thought that Bobby was kind of into the Rey Mysterio matches, for instance. Like he wow, I've never seen that before in my life and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But in fairness, those matches don't often have quite as many, gigantic moves that are followed up by, 2 counts and whatnot in those days. They went around a lot quicker. But yeah, I picked up on that too. I thought it was hilarious. But I really liked this match a lot. I thought it is a move match. It's they probably did overkill a little bit with some of the stuff they did, but I thought it was. Oh yeah. I was just marveled at seeing some of these innovative moves being done. Before 12 years before you'd see them done with any regularity in wrestling. And part of that is, of course, we mentioned Canyon being, the innovator of offense, which really wasn't just a catchy nickname for him. It was true at the time. He was very much innovating moves every week that nobody had seen before. And then Saturn just as much, even if he wasn't innovating something, he was showing something to a national audience for the first time. And I loved this. I thought it was like, to me, I was completely all in favor of this match until the dueling Mortai at the end. That was so unnecessary, and it kind of hurt. If it was just Raven, it would have, in the Mortis costume, that would have been great. But I'll be honest, the whole time after Raven's reveal, all I was thinking is, who the hell was the other Mortis?
I know. They never show it.
And they never show him. I was waiting for him to unmask and be, I don't know, Sick Boy or something. But
it was Brian Lee.
Brian Lee has shrunk to become the new Mortis.
John Curtis.
Raven could be like, I put Brian Lee in my dryer. When I pulled him out, this is what he looked like. But oh my gosh. We didn't even mention Benoit's atrocious promo before the Starcade.
Quote the Raven, no more.
That was awesome. What are you talking about?
Quote the Raven, no more. But anyway, besides that, Kanyon, yes. Kanyon, I think this is a guy, and I think we talked about this on the show. Kanyon is a guy that is it's so tragic what happened to him. It's so tragic how his career ended up, how his life ended. And because he genuinely was one of the most innovative wrestlers. He was good at every role they ever put him in. And I think that shines here. This is him as a kind of cold babyface, basically, in this match. And he's still out there working his ass off, getting his opponent over, getting himself over, getting his moveset over. And, of course, within a few months, he'd settle into finding who he was as a character. And so this match was just as much about him as it was Saturn. But then ultimately the post-match is what this match is kind of remembered for, which is Saturn's babyface turn and setting up the great feud that led into the Fall Brawl match we reviewed on our Raven episode. So I really enjoyed this. The springboards, the suplexes, the Kanyon fighting from underneath and displaying just crazy new moves that would become the staple of every kid's creator wrestler moveset in the late 90s. So, I love this match, and lots of respect to Chris Kanyon.
I fucking loved it too. Such a Tim match in the best way. My quibble is not with Bobby in the commentary though. It's with Mike and Tony and whoever wants to keep praising Nick Patrick during the match. Like they focused on him for some reason because they kept bringing him up. And I'm like, does something happen later in the show? Probably. I don't know, but it was just like a lot of like positive Nick Patrick stuff. I'm like, nope, I don't need to hear that. I'd rather listen to Bobby be sarcastic about the match than hear some Nick Patrick praise. But like, so during the slowdown part of the match, it was just like sort of bomb throwing and the kicking out, but they slowed it down and it was very earned, I felt like, because they worked really hard and they were both trying to find that one mistake or that one thing that they could use to turn the match, and they just kind of kept digging for it and kept countering each other in like a really awesome way. And even with the two Mortises, I don't know. To me, it's the same thing as the Flock. It was fuckery, but it didn't really take away from it that much, just because of the work that they put in thus far in the match. Yeah. Like,
I mean, they don't overdo it really. It's
just
some bullshit. It's just some bullshit, and it's just whatever.
But it leads to Saturn having just a really memorable post match. Like, like I'm conditioned to have these beatdowns at the end of matches, especially in ECW, and that's where you end it. And then for him to have that great comeback and turn was just, it made it for me. I freaking love this match, and
the other Mortis was me. I went out there under the mask. I didn't have anything else to do. Nobody knew.
Should.
It's one of those that it's
funny. The wife woman would be a dead giveaway.
Learned it all from Arn.
I think that this wrestler is unique in our podcast land here just because of I have much more of a depth of knowledge for him as a wrestler than I do most of the guys that we talk about. So for me, I had all this stuff I was bringing with me when I was learning about him in WCW, and that's not typically the case for us. So did watch a lot of Saturn matches. One that we had already covered with Raven. When I was watching, I'm like, we've already watched this, haven't we? Like, yeah, I can't choose this match.
Which, I mean, is like his best match.
It's so good.
And
so good.
honestly, probably like a top 5 match of the year in WCW. Like, that match is incredible. But anyway, we already talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Fall Brawl 98 one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
mm-hmm.
I'll go over what else I watched when we talk about our honorable mentions. But what I decided on was I think of Saturn as a tag team wrestler, and I wanted to see what he had in tag teams in WCW. So what I landed on was Raven and Saturn versus Malenko and Benoit from Spring Stampede 1999.
The last great WCW pay-per-view.
Is
Sure
it?
is. Yep.
Okay.
Sure is.
Well, this has got to be one of the reasons, I would hope.
Like, legitimately great, not like ironically bad and enjoyable.
Right.
Not like Vince Russo.
Not like the way I like things, but like real.
Not what I...
Like, it's a great show top to bottom. It really is.
Yeah.
Well, this match is a fucking banger, and it's a lot. So they recap, to start the match, an episode of Thunder where Saturn and Raven had had crashed onto Benoit onto a table, but it doesn't break. So they kind of like go into a little bit of their feud. And then Benoit misses the headbutt and smashes into a chair. So that leads them to this match, and Malenko and Benoit are with Arn Anderson, who...
They are the Horsemen at
They are the
this
Horsemen,
point.
basically.
It's Benoit, Malenko, Arn, and Flair. And they're, I would say at this point, they're all heels. They had started out after they reformed the Horsemen. Everybody's a babyface because, you can't, WCW fans are always going to want to cheer the Horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
But they've done this angle where Flair has become the WCW champion and president of the company also, and now he's like drunk on power, so he's like turned heel, and the Horsemen are still with him. Arn looks sexy as fucking all black, by the way.
Dude, how good shape was Arn?
I'm sorry, I just put on the match in the background.
It's
and
hot.
I didn't have that in my notes.
How good a shape was he in for this?
Why do you think
I amazing? Yeah, he looks super trim here in 1999. So, anyway, sorry, the Horsemen are heels at this point. You've got Raven and Saturn, who have, after spending, the latter half of 1998 feuding, have now reunited as no more flock, but they're a tag team. So, and I think this kind of started with the Horsemen sort of singling out Raven, and nobody really cared because Raven's a piece of shit. Fuck him. So nobody came to help him except Saturn, who was just he didn't really give much of an explanation other than "I have my reasons" kind of thing.
What are you looking at?
His reason is that he was Raven's friend and not part
he was
of the
Raven's
flock.
friend, not a member of the flock. Exactly. I think it's maybe Saturn being just a bit of a contrarian here. If everybody hates Raven, if no one's going to help Raven, then I'm going to be the one who breaks the ice.
He doesn't adhere to society's norms.
He doesn't, and he proves it with that outfit that he wears to the ring.
Oh boy!
Do we call it chainmail? What do we call it? It's a chain link vest.
I think it's a chain link dress.
A cape.
It's very Marilyn Manson at that time.
Yeah.
And then he is wearing what is referred to in commentary as a leather Tuscadero.
Okay.
Can I confess something? I don't know what a Tuscadero is.
Yeah, I have no idea. I assume it's this, which Bobby calls mud flaps.
I think Tony has also referred to this as a corset, so maybe
It's not a corset at all.
No, it's not, but I think because of the lace in the back, there. You know what?
What's Lois wearing around the Schiavone household? Jeez.
he did wear a version of this that so it sort of had more of a midriff to it. Like here, it's just
right.
when he actually gets in the ring and wrestles, it's just the skirt, right?
Yeah, because he takes off the waist trainer part of it.
He takes off. Yes, there is a version of this that rode up rather high and had the lace. It was sort of more of a looked more like a corset. I mean, it wasn't, but that's sort of the idea. Because I remember him. I watched a match from that iteration of Perry Saturn for consideration. I don't even remember what the match was at this point.
It might have been that. Didn't this all start because he lost the match to Chris Jericho where the loser
yeah,
he had a dress?
Yeah, he had a loser wears a dress match with Chris Jericho, but he took a liking to wearing the dress, even though
I love that
lost.
so much.
I'm glad nobody picked any of those Jericho matches because I kind of think they're trash.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
they didn't have great. They did not have great chemistry.
That's weird.
It is. You would think they would work well together. But anyway.
Regardless, he can wear whatever the fuck he wants.
He can wear what he likes.
He pulls it off. It doesn't matter. He looks badass. He looks amazing. Everybody looks... These 4 wrestlers are, like, fucking sponge-worthy. Like, it's like they are...
Sponge-worthy?
I'm just like...
Damn.
They're just hot. I mean, all of it, this combination of wrestlers and I don't know, it's exciting, like, because I know what they could do, and they're all very talented, and so it just makes me, like, very nervous.
Oh, well, and after burying that Washington, D.C. crowd, how friggin' awesome is this crowd?
Oh, they love it.
Oh,
yeah, they're great. My ECW heart just loves it. So anyway, Saturn's got his, like, yellow eyes in, too, so it's like a whole... It's like a whole thing. How does... It's like, all the shit that Saturn does, like, it looks amazing. It's so physical. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to put these blinding contacts in. Like, why? I mean, like, it looks so cool. Like, but to me, it ups everything. Like, just thinking about how he sees things through the contacts, it's got to be very uncomfortable and weird. Yeah. So, I don't know. So they grapple very briefly, because I thought they would be like a typical sort of, mat wrestling type component to this, given the wrestlers involved. But no, we don't fuck around with that very much at all, because Saturn is pushed to the outside, to the floor, where Malenko immediately jumps on him from the side to attack him. And Saturn ain't having that. Throws Benoit back into the ring, double teams him with Raven. They whip him into the corner, get 2 on him. Another double team as Saturn is tagged back in. He covers for 2 again. Immediately we're starting with the pen attempt, so it's going to be a lot of that. Bobby points out how well matched all 4 of these men are. I was curious what you guys' thoughts were with putting Raven in with the evenly matched conversation with the other 3 wrestlers.
I think it was legitimate, because I think we had done on our Benoit episode that match that he had with Raven, which was very good. It sold out in '98. But also that all of them were kind of occupying the same space on the card, that sort of the mid-card guys that the fans were wanting to elevate beyond the level that they were at that time. And I think all of them were sort of in that deal where you could put them in there and they'd have – Raven certainly wasn't the technician that Benoit and Malenko, or probably even Saturn, were, but I think Raven was a good worker that could have a good match with most people because he was very smart and knew his character, and he was over and could talk. And, I think it added an element. We had seen these combinations have good matches before, whether it was Raven versus Saturn versus Benoit. So I think it's fair to say that he was in that same, all those guys, you throw Jericho in there at the time, or a little bit before that, I guess, and then maybe a handful of other guys that were kind of banging into the proverbial glass ceiling in WCW at that time. And clearly from the reactions here, I think the fans were ready for all these guys to be major players.
Yeah, and I think it can be said that in 1999, Chris Benoit could carry anyone to at least a 3-star match. It's kind of that broomstick formula for a new era. But it's not a case of, okay, Saturn and Raven could individually have good singles matches with Benoit. That's not saying much. The fact that no matter what combination of those three that you looked at, you've got like a near 5-star match. Like Saturn and Raven had a near 5-star match. I mean, I think it's a near 5-star match, that Fall Brawl blow off that they had for their feud. Raven and Benoit at Sold Out, to some people, depending on who you ask, is 5 stars. I mean, that's not nothing. I mean, that's right there. You know, you're working with. I mean, and we talked about Saturn and Benoit having an awesome singles match earlier in the show. So I mean, it just makes sense that even when you don't think of Raven as being, being able to carry the technical load in the way that somebody like a Malenko or Benoit could, he works really, really well.
Yes.
With this combination of guys. I will say, at the time, putting myself back in my 1999 fan mindset, I was a little bit pissed that they put Saturn and Raven back together, just because it just hadn't been that long since they feud.
Continuity issues?
Yeah, continuity issues and just character issues. I was like, I don't want to see Saturn teaming with this guy again. I kind of liked where Raven was as that. I think they were starting like their version of the hardcore division, and Raven was a heel doing his thing as part of that group. And I think the main problem was that Saturn was twisting in the wind. They needed something for him, as talented as he was, and they couldn't figure it out. So they just kind of settled on, well, let's go back to the well, what worked before, and that's how we got here. So I wasn't thrilled with the decision on the face of it, but once they actually did it and started having matches like this, I was like, I think I can make my peace with this pretty quick.
I gotta say, to add a little context to this time period of WCW, I really thought that pairing, along with Benoit Malenko, and really Tony even alludes to some commentary, and Mysterio and Kidman, the Jersey Triad, which would be formed with DDP and Canyon and Bam Bam. It really did feel like a tag team revival, because tag team wrestling was dead in 1998. Absolutely dead as a doornail, and whatever a doornail is. And
to the point that the belts weren't even being defended. They were just in abeyance for months and months.
Rick Steiner and Kenny Chaos were the tag champs at one point. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. But so this was not only a revival of the tag division, WCW's TV product was getting to be really bad around this time. And these guys were carrying the show, in my opinion. I remember, that summer, like, I would tune into Nitro, and the only thing I'd be waiting on was what's going to happen in the tag division with these 4 teams, adding the Triad into it. And they would go out and just have these badass matches every week. And it was really a breath of fresh air, and unfortunately it didn't last long enough, but it did feel like it was revival. And you hear Tony on commentary, almost being a fanboy, talking about how great, he says how great it is to see tag team wrestling back again, because it really was a dark period, starting in about mid-97 all the way through 98.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Perry Saturn is the fucking best choice for this tag team revitalization, because I love watching them in a tag team. Raven tags in. He gets drop kicked to the floor, where Malenko and Double A take the opportunity to stomp on his face. Bobby says that he knows how ruthless Double A is after managing him for so long. So he knows that any chance that he has to get involved in this match, he will. Back in the ring, Raven eats a chop as Malenko tags in. They double team, as Bobby talks about how all 4 of these men love pain, and they're all into pain. I I feel like all that checks out. I think through what I know about all these dudes, there's either a very high pain tolerance or an enjoyment of pain, especially in Raven's case. So I think it adds sort of a level of you have to be a little bit more brutal during this match because you know that the guy opposite you is not scared of hurting at all. And he's going to do everything he can to hurt you, and he doesn't care what you do to him.
It's almost the point that, what Bobby's mentioning is that the Benoit and Malenko's finishing holds, both being submissions, won't work on Raven because he won't quit.
He won't. Because he doesn't feel that pain. It doesn't register with him. So they have to think outside of that. Malenko gets the vertical suplex on Raven for 2. Another quick tag by Benoit, and Raven grabs an inside cradle, but Benoit kicks out. Commentary mentions that the ref, Charles Robinson, has a close connection to Horseman Ric Flair. So, seems like they're saying that he might be a little bit lenient on the Horseman during this match. We'll see. Benoit suplexes Raven for another 2. A lot of this. They double team Raven in the corner while the ref argues with Saturn. Malenko whips Raven into the corner and eats a pair of clotheslines, and then Malenko spits on Saturn. And I was like, oh, honey, oh, don't do that, because I've seen him snap in a match, and I thought it was really going to ramp up, but he doesn't attack him after the spitting, which I thought was weird. He sends Raven into the corner again and eats a boot twice before Raven finally gets a clothesline off and makes the hot tag to Saturn. Saturn clobbers all 3, including Arn, who had popped up right around then, gets Benoit under his skirt in the corner. He props him up, stands up on the ropes, and drapes his Tuscadero skirt over his face and starts punching him I'm jealous at that point.
Jealous.
I need the Tuscadero spot. Yeah. Malenko sets Saturn up in the corner, but Raven scoops him up on his shoulders, and Saturn just kind of jumps off and pushes him down hard off the top rope. Saturn steps up the Death Valley driver, but Benoit saves it. And then eats a German suplex by Benoit. Raven flies at Benoit, and they both spill to the floor. Kind of a wild spot there. Raven disappears for a minute. Back in the ring, Malenko grabs a Texas Cloverleaf on Saturn, but he grabs the ropes to break that hold. I like that spot.
Mm-hmm.
He comes back.
Crowd was into it.
Yeah, it was good. He comes back to finally hit the Death Valley driver on Malenko, just as Benoit hits the flying headbutt on Saturn for a close 2. Yeah, it was so good.
So sick.
Stupid, awesome, seamless teamwork. And then you get a great shot of Arn's what the fuck face after that.
Yeah. Yeah, his facial expressions were great.
So good. Benoit chops the shit out of Saturn while Bobby wonders, where did Raven go? Like, oh yeah, he was knocked to the floor, and then Raven pops up right when he wonders where he was at. Backbreaker for 2 on Saturn, and then they start attacking the knee. Dean tries to cover a few times and then hooks a sleeper hold on Saturn. Raven stomps Dean's head to release, and then gets the suplex on Saturn. They double team again, but Saturn still won't stay down. He is just as ruthless and as ungiving up, is that a word, as Raven is. So that's another thing that makes our team sort of unique to me. They do the belly to back on Malenko by Saturn, who finally makes the tag to Raven. Raven comes in, elbows everyone, clotheslines Malenko to the floor. Saturn follows around on the side as Malenko gets thrown to the floor. He throws a chair up in the ring to Raven, and then attacks Double A and Malenko while Raven is in the ring setting up the chair. The crowd gets to their feet.
What a difference a year makes. The crowd goes from booing the drop toe hold spot to
anticipating it.
Yeah.
They're waiting for it. The whole match, they were waiting for it. He grabs some Y, does the drop toe hold into the chair, big pop. Enter the table that Raven and Saturn had brought to the ring that we completely forgot about. I didn't even mention at the beginning, but they came out toting the table.
With a table, yes.
Yes, I really, really love when you can bring back a prop that I've previously forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of ECW flavor there too. Malenko is laid out on the table, but Arn pulls him away just as Saturn goes off the top turnbuckle, smashes into the table. Fucking sick bump. Meanwhile, even flow DDT on Malenko in the ring. And then Arn wants to come in. The ref chases him off. The timing at the end is beautiful.
Yeah.
So,
nice.
Arn gets in the ring. The ref chases him off. Benoit does the flying headbutt right into the chair that is on top of Raven's head.
Eats it too.
Just stunning. Like, stunning. It's a complete, as Tony says, sacrifice move that gets the win for Malenko because he covers Raven. But boy,
what a finish!
Yeah,
that's an amazing finish. Yeah, I mean, say what you will, it's kind of hard to watch.
Yeah,
yeah.
See, and I hesitated on that part to like praise it much,
right?
But
it's extremely effective.
It's extremely amazing. So it's hard to like not praise it. And I love it. Like I love the finish to this. Everyone is all fucked up. All four of these guys are incredible at what they do. Adding Arn to the mix just is that perfect little spice to an incredible match. It's just so cool to like what we've seen of Raven and Saturn at odds, and then to put them together at the end, which pissed some of you guys off. But just in this little weird world that we've created on Talk'n WCW, to watch them like
come full circle.
It's you know, it's cool, and I really like it. And I think that Perry Saturn adds something to this match that nobody else could, and it really is worth a rewatch if you've not watched Spring Stampede 1999 in a while. Watch it,
Absolutely.
And especially this match. What do you guys think?
Oh yeah, I don't think that I'm speaking too far out of turn to say this is definitely the best match that we watched tonight.
Yeah.
This took the cake for me. This is just great tag team wrestling, high octane, impactful. They work around the referee, and there is that element that where the referee may be on the take, you know, and you're not entirely sure if he is or isn't on the take, but you definitely feel like you're kind of pissed at him because it feels like he's favoring the Horseman a little bit here, and it plays into the match so well because the heat on Raven and Saturn is great. The segments there, and then the hot tags. There's 2 hot tag segments, and both of them are equally effective. Saturn comes in and raises hell, and then later on Raven gets one and comes in and raises hell. The crisp timing of the teamwork stuff. Arn's interference is perfect throughout the match. He knows exactly when to come in and get his pot shots in, when to sort of influence the match. Benoit and Malenko are like machines.
It's amazing.
Match. They're just they're almost like don't have emotion. They're just Terminators trying to wipe out their opposition. And even though it's kind of a weird visual since we've seen where his character was a year prior, Raven has a lot of energy on the apron, slapping the turnbuckle to get the crowd into it and rallying the people behind Saturn to get him to make the hot tag and everything. I thought it was, I loved this match the first time I saw it on that show. And I was pleased to see it's just as good as I remembered it being. It was a really strong, especially for 1999. It can't be stressed enough. This was a very strong tag team match. And a real kind of mix of a throwback tag team match with the new age wrestling style we were seeing out of Perry Saturn and Chris Benoit in particular. And Malenko is amazing, and Raven is one of the best psychologists that there is in wrestling. So
For sure.
it was I think it was a beautiful mesh, and I could have watched them wrestle another 20 minutes easily.
Yeah. So I'll just put this out here because I do like to point it out when it does occur. This match was number 36 on my greatest WCW matches
Shit. Wow.
of all time list. Yeah.
Good pick.
I had a brief moment of panic where I thought maybe I'd overlooked it, but no, it's on here. And that's quite high, honestly, for what was a pretty hard list to put together. Because we're still in 4.5 star range, basically, when you're in the 30s. Yeah, this is such an ambitious match, I think, especially for 1999. And everything they do comes off beautifully. It's smooth as silk. There's not a botch to be found. And it's really quite breathtaking to sit back and rewatch. Whether it's in 1999 or 20 plus years later.
Every bit of it holds up.
Every bit of it holds up, yeah. And
even the finish, I will say.
Well, sure. Yeah, even some of the participants.
Sorry about it.
Yeah. On a show where we had two Chris Benoit matches, but whatever.
Unintentional.
Don't worry about
it. Let's Chris Benoit retired in 2004, I believe.
Someone had to say it. If there is any single reason to watch WCW in 1999, it is not the singles matches, it is the tag team division, which Greg, as you pointed out, was completely revitalized. And Saturn is such a huge component of that, and not just teaming once again with Raven, which whatever qualms I have with that will be dispelled very quickly because this team isn't going to last for the long haul. No, Raven's going to get plugged in there with, or Saturn, is going to get plugged in there with Benoit, of all people, to form a new tag team because they do quite a bit of musical chairs, with these teams in 1999. All of it, I think, for the better, as convoluted as some of it seemed, as some of it sounds to try to describe how it plays out. You mentioned the triad getting involved, and it all just kind of contributes to this larger story playing out of the younger horsemen and Benoit and Malenko, wanting to step out on their own, don't want to do Ric Flair's dirty work anymore, similar to Saturn not wanting to do Raven's dirty work, and Canyon becoming pals once again with Raven. So it's like all this shit feels like that we've talked about on this episode sort of comes full circle.
Yeah, and then Raven, of course, eventually forms a new faction called the Deadpool that lasts about 2 weeks.
Yes. Canyon's going to end up in the triad with DDP and Bigelow. You've got Benoit and Saturn becoming a new tag team. Malenko's still in there, still often teaming with Benoit as well. But that, of course, is going to lead us to the Revolution with Jenny, your favorite, Shane Douglas, yada, yada. Point being, just speaks to Saturn's versatility in working with a variety of opponents. So I would say not to get ahead of ourselves and our recommendations, our honorable mentions, what have you, but this is, I've said it before, this is a Greg Phillips very prototypical version of, I think, the SmackDown 6, this tag team scene in WCW in 99.
100%.
The Horsemen, you got the Horsemen, you got Raven and Saturn, and you've got the other side of that equation, which we haven't talked about, Kidman and Rey Mysterio.
Yep.
And all 6 of these guys are going to mix it up at Slamboree a month later in 1999. So
yep, another great match.
I can see it's another great match. I can see not picking it for a Saturn episode because he is kind of 1 out of 6 guys in a match where everybody is super talented, right? You might pick that as a best of WCW tag team matches, but you can't really single out any one performer in a match like that. So, that was one I did rewatch. I did just because I think it's a great match, but couldn't in good conscience say it's a Perry Saturn match.
Right.
But anyway,
but if you like this,
really,
Jimmy, I highly recommend watching that one. It's a
yeah,
hell of a match.
yeah, definitely need to do.
Yeah,
the only thing I will say, I wish that Raven and Saturn had busted out the total elimination.
They kind of did at the beginning.
Yeah, a little bit of one because
but it wasn't.
It was their version of it.
I don't know if Raven can do the spinning kick deal.
You know what? I think he can, but
apply yourself, Raven.
Yeah.
I like that they
level,
did
Raven.
as much as like it's not as it's certainly not as flashy as the Eliminators version, but it's probably better than like what the Midnight Express were doing,
right.
Which don't get me wrong, we talked about them last
yeah.
episode in praise of, but I thought it still came off pretty cool for what it was. But anyway, yeah, this match in a lot of ways reminds me of probably like that what is it? That No Mercy 2002 tag title match with Benoit and Angle against Edge and
Rey Mysterio. Yep.
And then again, then the next month you had Survivor Series with those two teams plus the Guerreros. So it's like was Paul Heyman watching some '99 WCW when he's booking SmackDown in 2002 with like a lot of these same guys?
I would think
so. Mysterio and Benoit are the two. That's 1/3 of it in both. WCW and WWE, these tag team scenes that were so hot. But anyway, I don't know. That's a very side discussion. Interesting parallels is what I'm saying. So watch all these great tag matches in '99 WCW, most of which involve Perry Saturn in some way. Watch your old SmackDown 6 and fall of 2002 in WWE. See how they compare. Fun experiment, I think.
Yeah, I was very. That's a great comparison that I hadn't really thought of until you vocalized it. But it's instantly, I'm like, yeah, that's a great parallel there. Those 97 or 99 rather tag matches. It also a great source of frustration for me, and always has been as a WCW fan, because even at the time, you could read the tea leaves if you were a fan of wrestling. You could read the direction things had gone in. The WCW was hanging on not hanging on in terms of, I didn't think they were going to go out of business, but they were hanging on in terms of relevancy by a thread. Mm-hmm. But they had these guys there that we as a fan base, obviously everybody didn't have the same tastes as me at age 15 or whatever, but the general WCW fan base had these guys that they were behind. New faces, fresh faces, Saturn, Benoit, Malenko, Jericho, Mysterio, Kidman, Raven, on down the list, that they really wanted to be elevated, and the fans viewed them as stars, and it just felt like the company wouldn't get that last little nudge behind them to get them to the level where we could have been seeing these guys. I legitimately feel that we could have seen these guys in main events by the summer of '99, and it didn't really materialize that way, unfortunately.
Did you guys have any honorable mentions that we haven't talked about yet?
Tim mentioned my top honorable mention, which was the Slamboree match. I didn't go with it for the same reason that he mentioned, where I felt like it's too much of an ensemble match, but it really is in many ways just as good as this one. It's a great match, as my mom keeps texting me for some reason.
She's a big supporter too. Huh?
Yeah.
Apparently so. She knew we were talking about Perry Saturn, and she just lit up.
Had to get a run in. Yeah.
And also, weirdly enough, I should preface this. I haven't rewatched it, so I don't know if this match is good, but I remember it being interesting. which is I almost picked the Saturn and Goldberg match because it's obviously Saturn's most prominent match. And I do remember them doing some kind of cool.
Stampede, Goldberg, Saturn.
98, yeah, that's the one I watched.
Yeah,
I think so.
I came real close.
Yeah.
I feel like, and without having rewatched it, I remember them doing some kind of cutting edge MMA style stuff in that match. The rolling leg lock and things of that nature. And I don't know, I just felt it felt a little physical, and so I almost went with that one. That would probably be my second honorable mention that I strongly considered for this one.
I watched that one too, and I liked it, but I don't know. It felt more Goldbergy than it did.
That was my exact takeaway. Also, was as much as I liked the match, and it was sort of cutting edge for like. They definitely tried a lot of stuff that didn't necessarily come off that well, but I admired the effort. It ultimately felt more like a Goldberg match than a Saturn match because it says more about just sort of where Goldberg was in his career at that point in 1998, and having a match where he does eat some offense and it gets a little bit of time. And it's been a little bit forgotten, I would say, because everybody goes, oh, he didn't have his first real match wasn't until the DDP thing at Halloween Havoc. It's like, no, that's not true at all, actually. It's a really good match. It's probably his best match, but it's not by any means his first real match of any length. So yeah, there was that, and they had a rematch at Slamboree, which felt like two guys who had worked together already and had figured out and worked some of the kinks out. So it was a little bit smoother, but in a way not kind of as good or as entertaining, I should say. Because that one's a little bit more polished. But yeah, ultimately, I just said these are Goldberg matches, not Saturn matches.
Yeah, I watched both of those, and Saturn's big thing is his adaptability and how he kind of melts into whatever style his opponent is doing, and you can't do that with Goldberg. So it doesn't
you
really.
You can try.
Yeah, you can
you
try,
can see what happens when you try. Cause
it doesn't really.
Ugly.
It doesn't really showcase him like.
You're going to get run through, but
I mean. Also, I watched that Jersey Triad match that from what was Bash at the Beach '99.
Okay.
But that was good. It was long though. It was a bit long. And
that is a long match.
And he does. It's interesting because it's a handicap match with him and Chris Benoit and then the other three, which I kind of was earmarking that for one of the other wrestlers in that match that I might come back into later. So
intriguing.
Yeah, could be one that I bring up again.
Along similar lines, I had it was actually just before that match, Jenny. It was at the Great American Bash '99. You had Benoit and Saturn versus DDP and Canyon. So no Bigelow. I think Bigelow does get involved, but the match on paper is just DDP and Canyon for the Triad versus Benoit and Saturn, which, according to my GWCW, I liked a little bit better than the Bash at the Beach match. But they're pretty they're pretty similar. They're pretty similar. And then other than that, I watched TV title match with Booker T at not sold out Super Brawl '98. Pretty solid outing. But again, I might look at it as more of a, if we do like a Booker T episode.
TV title match was that?
Yeah, so Booker T had a match with Rick Martel right before that, and he won, but had like unfinished business with Saturn. So, and I think honestly, Martel was supposed to win it, but he ended up getting injured. He like blew his knee out. And so they had to call an audible in the finish. Booker T wins the title, and goes on to advance against Saturn. So he basically had to defend the title twice.
That might be a good match to save for a possible episode on the TV title as well.
Okay. Okay.
If we chose to do such a thing.
If we did such a thing.
Mm.
If we did such a thing.
Any other Saturn thoughts before we pick our next topic?
No, I think innovative and ahead of his time is probably the best way I can describe WCW's version in particular of Perry Saturn. So I'm glad we picked him because he's a guy that kind of gets we kind of alluded to it with the Radicals, but he kind of gets lost in the shuffle because two of the other members of that group ended up being such big stars that people kind of forget that Saturn at the time was a big deal and was a very skilled wrestler who had a lot of good matches in WCW.
Yeah, dude is great. I can sort of see the criticism that he has a lot of matches that fall into that category of this feels like I'm playing a video game kind of thing. But
Brian Cage
at the
matches.
At the same time, I'll put it this way. I say I like that style of wrestling. I like that style of wrestling when it's exemplified by wrestlers that I really like. If I don't care about the wrestlers, then that kind of thing is not going to win me over, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if I fundamentally like the guys in there who are doing it, then I sort of just, I don't want to say dismiss that criticism, but I'm like, I don't care. It's entertaining to watch. Like I try not to, I'll do star ratings all day, sure, but I'm not going to get too into the weeds on that kind of thing just because, look, I don't watch that much wrestling these days, and I don't ask as much from my wrestling as maybe I used to, or as much as somebody who's a professional wrestling journalist does. Like, I don't know. If it's an entertaining match with a guy that I really like, and I see some cool moves, I guess I'm an easy mark. You know what? There's a reason why I love 2018 NXT so much. I feel like Perry Saturn would have slotted right in there.
For sure.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. He is
Put
one
him
of those...
against Aleister Black in 2018. Come on.
He is one of those that, in this whole journey of learning about wrestling that just super stands out, like, on a level of, like, a Vader for me. Like, I get sort of attached. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I get sort of attached to these guys, and it makes me hesitant to, like, see the where are they now portion of this. I don't know anything about Saturn and his current day life. I don't know.
Neo-Nazi.
See, I figured
No,
that's probably what was coming.
He's not.
Okay, good.
I will say, he's not doing great, but I think reports of his, the extent of his troubles have been a bit exaggerated. He seems like he's kind of okay. I say that now, and we're gonna have a terrible headline the day the show releases. But I feel like the last that I heard was he was not in a great place physically, but he's not like destitute or.
I think Chris Jericho actually reached out and found him a couple of years ago, but nobody knew where he was, and Jericho
sounds right.
got a hold of him and kind of put him back.
Jericho or DDP or one of those guys, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, it hurts my heart to think of him like that, just because I've sort of fallen in love with his wrestling persona.
It's an unfortunate part of wrestling fandom, especially from that era. You have to operate under the assumption that if they were a star wrestler in the late 90s, they probably either ended up or just went through a really bad time before hopefully coming out the other end. It's very few guys 4 girls made it through that era in one piece, shall we say.
It's just in learning about him and following him through these different promotions, it does hurt my feelings to think that, he went through rough things, but a lot of them do, like you said. And do you guys think, what are the chances of seeing him, like, in some sort of capacity? And do we just sort of not know, like, is he just not on the radar at all? Like, I don't know.
I would, personally, I don't see him returning to wrestling because the last time I saw him, he, first of all, didn't look like he would be.
Well, Ric Flair is going to wrestle,
That's true.
In a very short amount of time. So
That's
it just
true.
makes my mind go to these places.
Perry's in it. Perry, the things that Perry kind of got into were a little bit, maybe more even. Not that Rick had a non-destructive lifestyle, but I don't think Rick quite went for some of the things that Perry went for in his personal life. And so,
physically, he's pretty. He's been through a lot.
He's much different.
I want to say like there are some cognitive issues that
makes sense.
Yeah.
That's
probably
kind of been
on by head injuries and whatnot.
Right. And
but I wouldn't rule out, he could still make an appearance just as put him in the Hall of Fame. Put him.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's not going to wrestle again, but I don't think he's in such a state where he can't make public appearances.
No, he can still talk.
I think that was the rumor for a long time.
Yeah.
But then,
there was a rumor that he was not even alive anymore for a
there
while.
Was.
I did hesitate on Googling him for a very long time before, figuring out if he was still with us or not. But, but he's just one of those ones that I just got super attached to, and it's part of the reason that I love wrestling.
Oh yeah. It's an unfortunate byproduct because the wrestlers sort of burrow into your psyche in a way that other entertainers necessarily don't.
So weird.
Because it's like even though they're not their real selves, it feels like they're their real selves, and that you almost have more of a personal connection with them than you with actors or musicians or anyone like that. At least for me, it's always been that way. So it is, it does feel. Unfortunately, I kind of have desensitized myself to it now, but it does feel like when you're attached to these wrestlers that when they do go through struggles, it does feel more impactful and hurtful because, you have this, you feel for these people and you know what they sacrificed and all this,
right?
For entertainment's sake and all that. So, at least we still have Mick Foley. So,
somehow.
Yeah.
Greg, is it your pick?
I think it's Tim's.
Oh God, we do this every time.
I'm pretty sure because it didn't. I picked the
Midnights.
I picked the Midnights. So it's got to be.
Okay, so last episode was the Midnights. That was Greg. This is you, Jenny. So yeah, it'll be me.
Okay.
All right. I'm not going to hem and haw about it. I sort of already had it on the back of my mind. My next pick was going to be this man. We're going to be going a little bit old school. I feel like we've been playing around. Well, not necessarily. This is more in the range of the Midnights. I'm beating around the bush. It's going to be Barry Windham. Finally do a full episode. We've had his matches before.
Sir.
We've talked about him. We have to do a Barry Windham episode.
We're going to get to talk all about the hotel rooms he's been in and the activities he's done in those hotel rooms.
This activities.
Oh my God! Fantastic.
Oh man!
Boy, and I'm going to spoil it for you right now. I'm going to do several appearances. I got a lot of stories about him. I do. I tried to tell Mark Madden, and he quit on me.
Oh, I love that pick. That's a great pick. Can't wait to dive into that. Real quick, before we do our plugs right here on the Place to Be Wrestling Network, of course you have the flagship, that's the Place to Be podcast. They are on episode number 603, if you can believe that, with the Royal Rumble. So check that one out. There's also YouTube Roulette on the feed, as well as the NWA Saturday Special and NWA Crock and Roll with our friend Sean Kidd, and Highway to the Impact Zone. Lots of cool shows on here and across all of the feeds. Gregory, what you got going on? Anything podcasting wise?
No podcasts at the moment. However, other than this one, of course, which people are listening to now.
Yes.
But I do have happenings going on over at my Twitter feed, which is at gphillips8652. Very catchy
Sure
Twitter
is.
name if there ever was one. And somewhat tangentially related to that, it is now official. I am, along with my hard-traveling fanboy companion, Nick Duke, and his entire family, we are going to the AEW New Japan Pro Wrestling crossover pay-per-view event in Chicago in June. So,
that's fantastic! Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I've never been to Chicago, and I think that arena is going to be rocking. So, should be a fun time.
Can't wait to hear about that.
That can be on the old pay-per-view. Is there an opportunity we can view that along with you?
I believe so. I believe, yes, you can order it through Fight TV. I believe that New Japan World will be carrying it as well, their streaming service, and probably on your local pay-per-view provider, you can tune in to.
Might have to look into that.
Yeah. AEW NJPW Forbidden Door in June at the United Center, I think it is. I think that's what it is, and there used to be the United Center, whatever it is now, in Chicago. Looking forward to it. This will be my second AEW pay-per-view of the year, so that's cool.
Awesome. What about you, Tim?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Cyke68, CYKE68. Not tremendously active these days. I'm in a bit of a Twitter rut, I'm going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having a real hard time with the bullshit, and I'm about tired of it. But if you want to talk wrestling, great. If you want to talk comics, great. If you want to talk some Beverly Hills 90210, also great. And that is because I'm the co-host of the podcast known as 9021 No-So. So this was, and is still, as of the time you're listening to this podcast, part of the North-South Connection. So do subscribe to our friends, our affiliate, the North-South Connection, where you'll find a bevy of great wrestling content, just like you will here on Place to Be Nation Wrestling. But 9021 No-So gonna be spinning off onto its own exclusive feed, which we've done a soft launch. You can actually find that right now if you search 9021 No-So on your preferred podcatcher app. Gonna be simulcast as we wrap up the first season of Beverly Hills 90210. So just really one episode left to go for us, which is crazy to think. And then it's going to be off to the races, just exclusive to the 9021 No-So feed. So if you're enjoying that podcast today on the North-South Connection, you'll want to make the switch here in short order. And if you're not listening, but you are interested in the show, again, do subscribe. And hell, if you want to be on the show, reach out to myself or JT. We have a dedicated email address, Gmail account as well. That is going to be 9021noso@gmail.com if you want to email us. But yeah, you can hit me up on Twitter if you want to talk about the show, or if you're interested in being on the show as a guest. We always have a third rotating seat. Jenny, you've been on. Mm-hmm. Greg, we'd love to get you in as well at any point. But yeah, just want to point that out there on an administrative note. So yeah, I think that should do it for my purposes. Jenny, why don't you take us home?
All right, so I think Twitter needs to get its act together so that Tim doesn't have to feel so triggered every time he's on Twitter. And
tired of hearing about Elon Musk.
Yeah,
every single tweet.
Fuckery.
I'm done with it.
I'm on Twitter at Jenny Position. All my shows are linked there. I am on North-South Connection every Wednesday with either a Freak Out Drive-In, you heard about Pluto, Talk'n Pop, The Journey Through Infinity. It's very soon the return of Bianca's First Time. Everything on Wednesdays, and then also I have the Extreme Three-Way Dance, which goes through the entire history of ECW, which is a really good podcast and a really good promotion to learn about. You can find that there. And I have some guest things that I've done recently. I was on an episode of Pop Goes the Movies, where we did a review of the new Doctor Strange with me and Andy and Scott Shiflett. So that was really fun. And got a couple of big things coming up, so stay tuned to that. And thank you for listening to Talk'n WCW, and we will see you in 6 to 8 weeks, probably.